let's talk about string operations, what we can do with strings. I have written here a word hello, and let's see what we can do with this string. The first thing we can do with the string is to get certain element at certain point. So the indices for strings start from 0. So basically I can write all the indices here, and the first element is at position 0. So, and if we would like to get one certain element or one symbol of the string, then we can use square brackets to get this element. So for example, if this is a variable s, then we can get s0, and this indicates this symbol. And if we would like to get, for example, the last one, we can use 4 here, and this points to this symbol. So this is, we can use this to print out the certain element or put it into another variable, and so on. And as was pointed out, the indices start from 0. So the first element is not at position 1, but it is at position 0. We can also do slicing. We can get a sub-string or smaller amount of string. Here I pointed out only getting like one element of the string. But if we would like to get, for example, 3 first symbols, then we can use slicing. And slice is written also in brackets, and we indicate the start and the end position. So if I write 0 and 3, then this means this substring here. The first index 0 is included, and the end index 3 is not included. So everything from 0 up to 3, but not included. And this we can use also, for example, to get like 2 last elements. We can use 3 and 5 here. As was pointed out, the end index is not included. So if I put 4 here, then I would only get 1 element. Here are some more examples of slicing. I will write them on the board too. The general form of this slicing is so that actually we have start, then we have end, and then we have step. And we can omit some of them depending on the default values. For example, if we don't put step inside this, we don't even have the colon here, then the step is by default 1. The start is by default 0, and the end is by default len of the string. By using function len, we can get the length of the string. So for example, for this string, len s is 5. And as you can see, the last index is always smaller than the length of the string. And this is actually useful. So using this default value, we can get the last element inside this 2. So for example, if I would like to get 2 last elements, I can actually write 3, and after colon I don't have to write the end, because the default value is good for me, so it's suitable. Also, I could, if I would like to get first 3 elements, I can write so. So here the 0 is not written, but it's meant to be as 0. So this takes the first 3 elements of the string. We can also use negative indices, and I will this is like the general form of the slicing, so we can use start and end and stop, and the default values are also written on the slide. And with negative indices we can start counting from backwards. So in addition to those indices, I could write below here -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5. So basically, I can also use the indices below the string. So for example, to get the last element, I could write s -1. So instead of getting the value 4 here, I could get the length and subtract 1, but instead I can just use -1. This also can be applied for slicing. So for example, to get 2 last elements, I could write here, so -2 and colon. So here the 3 is also, for this given string, the 3 works, but if the string would be longer or shorter, then I should calculate the actual value. But with this formula, I can always take the 2 last elements of the string. The same applies. I could take everything up to 2 last elements, so I can write here. So, and as was pointed out, the start index, the default is 0, and the end index is not included. So I basically get everything up to this point, or let's write it here. So everything from 0 up to this point. So the index -2 is not included. And actually the same applies also for the step. I can use negative step, but negative step means that we are walking from end to front, to start. So basically it's backwards. And for example, the easiest way to reverse the string is to write so. And you can see that the start and end is both are missing here, and that's okay because the default values start and end are okay in this example. And -1 means that everything is taken from the end to the start. If we are using negative step, then we have to see that the start should be actually a higher value than the end, because otherwise it wouldn't work. So for example, if I would like to take every second element of the string backwards, I can write so that it's basically starting from -1, then up to, for example, I can omit this value, but to indicate the step, I can write -2. So basically what happens is that it starts from this index and it takes every other value. If I would write 0 here, it would mean that the end index is not included. So in this case, I would get only O and L, because this index itself is not included. So if we are walking backwards, the start and end by default indicate the start is here and the end is basically here. So we can get everything up to and including the first element also. This is very convenient. There are other programming languages where you cannot use minus or negative index values. So in that case, you have to write, for example, here always length of s -2. So basically that's the same. But in Python, you can use the shortcut or shorter version of this, so you can only use negative indices. And yeah, to get the last element, you can use just -1. And to reverse the string, this was pointed out here also. Besides slicing, there are, of course, other operations you can do with string. So here are some examples. You can take the string and have it all in lowercase or in uppercase. You can see whether it starts with a certain substring, for example, whether the greeting starts with he, and it also takes into account whether it's upper or lowercase. You can get the index or the position, basically, if you are looking for a low. L and O, then it basically finds out that the position where this substring or this string is inside this bigger string, and it finds the starting position. So here it should return 3. Also, you can count how many L's are in the string. So in this given case, it should be 2. And you can replace something. But with replacing, we have to take into account that the string itself is immutable. Immutable means that you cannot change the actual value. So every time you want to kind of change the string, it actually creates a new string. So if we would actually want to replace, for example, this E to A, what happens is that it creates replace actually creates a new string, and it will become L O. So, and what happens is that the actual or the original string always remains the same. So if I would, for example, just do s dot replace, as I have done with greeting in this slide, you can see that if I print it out, the original string still is with E. If I would actually like to change the value of s, I would have to write so that I have to overwrite this variable. So in this example, what happens is that this one creates a new string, and now it is written, or the s variable is overwritten with this value. So, but without this operation, this itself doesn't change the value of s. So this is something to be noted, and also this is in certain cases it's good to know that you cannot change the strings. There are other data types which are immutable, and we'll talk about those later. But yeah, string is one of the data types which is immutable, and this is something you have to take into account if you are programming. And yeah, to actually change, this is put into quotes so that actually we cannot change it, we overwrite the value of this variable. But yeah, it is done using this assignment operation here. And replace, or there are other like lower and upper and other operations which kind of modify the string, but they actually don't modify it. They create a new string which is modified, and if we would like to replace the variable, we have to overwrite it ourselves. To conclude the topics of string, we will point out that the string can be used to represent text in our code. String itself is represented with quotes in our code. We can use both single quotes or double quotes. Also was pointed out that we can use triple quotes to have longer strings, which may include also new lines. A string is immutable, which means that we cannot change the value of the string, but what we can do, we can overwrite the variable. But yeah, the original string is not changed with whatever operation you use with strings. A string is an object, so we will cover the object topic later on. But yeah, basically, it would be nice that you know that the string itself is object, and all the operations or everything we write after variable tot and whatever function or method we are using, those are actually methods of this string object. But we will cover this later on. And as was pointed out, the string has different built-in methods, so we can make it lowercase, we can find out where some sub-string is located inside string, we can count some symbols, and so on. So basically there are a lot of functionality already built in into Python and you can use it freely.